Our next guest is Mr. Will Hild, and he is the executive director at Consumers First, and he is also a proud father and husband, and he's standing for American consumers. And you can find their website, actually. It's consumersresearch.org. Is that right, Will?
That's correct.
Okay.
People can join it there at consumersresearch.org.
Consumersresearch.org. You can follow them on Twitter at Consumers First. Welcome to the program this evening, sir. How are you doing?
Doing great. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Consumers Research before we dive into the topic.
Absolutely. Well, we're the nation's oldest consumer protection organization, founded in 1929. We have a 90-plus year pedigree of educating consumers about issues important to them and standing up for them in the marketplace and amplifying their voice. Over the last 5 years, since I came on as executive director, our main focus has been pushing back against the harm of woke capitalism that we've seen in corporate America and in so many other areas, where instead of focusing on serving consumers, corporations and organizations like the ones we're going to talk about today, instead focusing on cozying up to woke politicians and woke activists. And we're saying enough of that. We want people focusing on consumers and patients.
Are you familiar with the National Center for Public Policy?
We are. They're a great organization.
Right. So they, some time ago back, I mean, we're talking more than a decade, they buy shares of corporations so that they can attend their board meetings and make their voice heard on these issues. And I think they've also got like a scorecard going, or they make recommendations on when you have to vote for the board of directors, trying to educate people on making sure that they actually do use those proxies and vote on the board of directors, and that they vote for the right people.
100%. And unfortunately, we've had a real issue with some of the world's largest asset managers using the money that states give them to manage, state, local, and federal pension funds, pushing those corporations to go left. And that's one of the biggest, reasons we've had some of the problems we've had over the last, 10, 15 years.
I think that was unearthed and uncovered during COVID with BlackRock, right?
That's exactly right. And that's actually been one of our biggest, you could kind of call them our beta noir. We've run about $5 million of ads educating consumers around what BlackRock is doing to misuse your state's pension money to push the companies that are supposed to be serving you to go woke, whether that's, harmful net zero targets, DEI, discrimination in employment and promotion, and in some cases pushing them to take positions on, social issues like abortion and that kind of thing. So they're really not, 9 times out of 10, that's what I'm on talking about BlackRock and all the ways in which they're pushing corporate America to go woke.
It's impressive that you guys have been around since 1929.
Yeah, we were actually one of the first publishers of any kind of product review materials. So we used to have a magazine called Consumers Bulletin that I think at its height had, back when the population of the United States was only about 100 million people, we had about a readership of about 1 million people. So it was kind of like having a Reader's Digest in your coffee table. People would have the Consumer Bulletin, and it would have all these product review stuff. Now, obviously, that's not really necessary in today's day and age when you've got Yelp reviews and Google reviews and Amazon reviews and all that. But our main focus now is just making sure that consumers are aware when they're being harmed by things like what BlackRock is doing, and some of the hospitals that we talk about in the consumer warning we put out earlier this week.
So let's talk about this consumer warning, and folks can find it on your website. It is woke hospitals embracing political priorities ahead of patient care. Now, what happens if first do no harm?
That's exactly right. You think that they would mainly focus on their Hippocratic oath and focusing on patient care. And in fact, one of the hospitals we highlight, Cleveland Clinic, their CEO, who makes $7 million a year, I'll add, was quoted as saying, patient care, health care is only part of what we do. It's only part of their mission. Now, what's interesting about that is that Cleveland Clinic is a 501c3 nonprofit. They exist, and we're the same thing. So I know what this process looks like. When you become a nonprofit, you have to tell the government why you should get tax-exempt status. And you tell them what your main purpose is. And I guarantee that when Cleveland Clinic applied for nonprofit status, it did not say, we're going to kind of do some healthcare, but we're also going to engage in racial discrimination and hiring and promotion. And also we're going to have some programs for patients that are only open to people of certain races. And also we're going to take a lot of the money that the government gives us and spend it on green net zero boondoggles like solar wind farms that don't work and that kind of thing. Oh, and really importantly, we're also going to sexually mutilate children who might be confused about their gender. These are all things that Cleveland Clinic and some of the other hospital systems that we've mentioned, like Vanderbilt and Henry Ford Clinic, have been engaged in. And yet they are being subsidized both implicitly and explicitly, meaning they go get tax advantage status where they don't pay any kind of corporate or business or income tax. And they also, many of them get tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of government direct grants, both at the federal and state level for patient care and for research. So they are literally taking our tax dollars and they are taking our dollars as patients and they're using it to push a woke agenda. And that is not what they were created to do. It's not what they were founded to do. And it's not why the government subsidized them. So this consumer warning was put out to highlight that and to call state and local officials, state and federal officials, hopefully to look into this. I'm optimistic that, especially with the new direction the White House has taken over the last 6 months, so to speak, we are going to see some action against these hospitals.
So I was about to ask you if this has been brought to the attention of those within the Trump administration.
Yes. In fact, when we issued the consumer warning earlier this week, we made sure to send a letter both to every governor of a state where these hospitals that we're highlighting resides, but also to the federal government, specifically Harmeet Dillon, who runs the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Justice now under the Trump administration. Another gentleman by the name of Brett Shoemate runs the Civil Division at the Department of Justice, who's been tasked and is focused on covering hospitals that are mutilating children, abusing them under this insane left-wing transgender ideology. So we're hopeful that by highlighting what's going on at these hospitals in terms of discrimination and harming of children and what they're doing, wasting taxpayer dollars on green boondoggle nonsense, that we will see some action from the federal government. But we'd also like to see some of the states take action. There's no reason why the state of Ohio shouldn't be looking into Cleveland Clinic. Tennessee actually just won yesterday its Supreme Court case on against the ban on transgender surgeries on children. So that law in Tennessee has been upheld, and that law was passed specifically because of what was uncovered to be happening at the Vanderbilt medical system. So this is very important for these state governments to be taking this stuff seriously and looking into these organizations.
Absolutely. I think it's 23 states have laws on the books to protect children from mutilation surgeries, and I had Dr. Ross from Do No Harm Medicine is actually on the program this evening. He was discussing the Supreme Court ruling, also what they do at Do No Harm Medicine. And are you in touch with that group?
We are, and in fact, part of our consumer warning and our campaigns against Cleveland Clinic and Vanderbilt and Henry Ford Health have been based on Stop the Harms research. So they've been a fantastic partner in this. We've basically just been taking what they have found and amplifying it and highlighting it when it comes to the harming of children. And what's really interesting, since you happen to have him on tonight, let me note this, an interesting wrinkle. When we launched a campaign against Cleveland Clinic called Cleveland Clinic Exposed earlier this year in February, they legally threatened us. They sent us a cease and desist threatening to sue us and saying that our claims were false, that we were lying about them. And they said, we don't do surgeries. We don't do sex change surgeries on children. What's interesting is our claims were not based on our own information. They were based on the Stop the Harm database. And the Stop the Harm database methodology is looking at the reimbursement requests that hospitals make. And Cleveland Clinic had made a number of reimbursement requests, both to Medicare and to private insurance, for what they call penectomies, penis removal, and mastectomies, breast removals on kids under the age of 17 and a half.
Wow.
So if they're telling the truth when they tell you that we don't do these surgeries, well, then they're admitting to insurance fraud. Because they put in the request based on Stop the Harms database, they put in the request for money for those surgeries. So which is it, Cleveland Clinic? Are you lying about having done the surgeries, or are you guilty of felony insurance fraud? I would like to know, and I think the federal government would love to know.
Did you pose that question to someone there, and did you get an answer?
We have not gotten an answer. If people would like to take a look at kind of the hilarity that ensued once we launched this campaign, one of the additional funny wrinkles about them trying to sue us is that their lawyer is our lawyer, who it appears failed to do a conflict check. And so we got the cease and desist came from Jones Day law firm, which has represented us in front all the way up to the Supreme Court in a petition for certiorari. So, we didn't take very kindly to this for being betrayed by our own lawyers. So you can actually go to www.jonesdaybetrays.com and see the story of them betraying their own client on behalf of Child Sex Changer. We put a mobile billboard in front of that law firm's office, publicizing for people that this firm is willing to betray its own clients on behalf of people who do sex change operations. So we don't take kindly to anyone who defends people who mutilate children.
I hope that they refunded any monies you paid them, because it doesn't seem like they could charge you both, right?
Well, that's an interesting question, and we are still considering pursuing our legal opportunities. It's not something we've pulled the trigger on yet, but it is something we are strongly considering because the depth of betrayal here and just the nature of what they're defending. It's really disgusting that anyone would basically play cover for people who are harming children like this.
They can't take money from both sides.
Well, I agree. That's something that we are considering pursuing.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get back. We'll get back to the topic at hand, which is this report, it's a 14-page report. It's very in depth. And it is, the woke hospitals embracing political priorities ahead of patient care. And what does this look like in the hospital room?
That's a great question. So in terms of what it means for patients, let's drill into that. So one of the things that a lot of these hospitals have adopted is DEI, meaning diversity, equity, inclusion, but it's really just a stalking horse. It's a facade for racial and sex-based discrimination, both in hiring and promotion. But at some of these hospitals, even in the way they treat patients. Cleveland Clinic, for example, had programs that were only open to people of a certain race. So you're talking about treating people, differently based on their ethnic makeup. So that's disgusting for a number of reasons. But think about having a doctor, right? Do you want the doctor to have been chosen for their competency or skill, or because of the color of their skin or their nationality? I don't know about you, but if a guy's operating on me or a woman's operating on me, I don't want them chosen for the color of the skin. I don't want them chosen for what's between their legs. I want them chosen for how good are they. Could the hospital get the absolute best doctor that they can afford to take care of me? And a lot of these hospital systems are moving away from that, and including DEI in their considerations for hiring and promotion. It's something we've seen all across corporate America, and I'm sad to say we're seeing it in the healthcare system as well. In fact, Vanderbilt Medical System, somebody tipped them off that we were looking into them, and they put all of their DEI materials that they were bragging about during the Biden administration, they put them behind a password-protected wall so that we couldn't see them anymore, which is another reason we're calling for investigations. It's clear that they know what they're doing is not okay and not proper. And the last thing I'll just note is that even if you don't live near any one of these hospital systems, you don't live in Michigan, you don't go to Henry Ford Health, you don't live in Ohio, you don't live in Tennessee, you go to Vanderbilt, you don't live in Texas or near Johns Hopkins Children's in Florida, your tax dollars are subsidizing these activities because these healthcare systems don't pay taxes, and a lot of them get federal money directly and state money directly. So even if you never go there as a patient, the money that you're paying as a taxpayer that's supposed to go to research and making sure that we have the next breakthroughs that are going to save lives and for patient care to make sure that people are taken care of, they're being funneled off for all kinds of nonsense, from DEI to, like I said, this green boondoggle. Cleveland Clinic spent $7 million on a green project. Why a hospital is engaging in green energy projects is beyond me. And, if they want to do that, okay, but they should be doing it with their own dollars, not federal and state taxpayer dollars.
I cannot for one moment think that the Trump administration would be okay with this.
I don't believe ultimately they will be. We're early on in the days of the administration. The people that would be investigating this have just taken their roles. Harmeet Dillon and Brett Shumate at DOJ have just been confirmed by the Senate in the last few months. So these kinds of things take a little bit of time, but I'm hopeful that by shining a light on this, we are going to see some direct action investigation into these hospitals. And ultimately, what we've seen, what they've been able to do in higher ed. I mean, this is a very similar situation to what you've seen at Harvard and Columbia, where you've had universities engaging in anti-white and sometimes anti-Semitic discrimination and activities. And, it's cost Harvard hundreds of millions of dollars in direct grants from the federal government, and it looks like it's probably going to cost them their 501c3 status. And I think if these hospitals are engaging in that kind of behavior, if they're violating people's civil rights by discriminating against them, if they're wasting taxpayer dollars on completely irrelevant net zero, green energy boondoggle nonsense, I think they raise the question, should they have their 501c3 status revoked? And certainly should we be raise the question whether we should be subsidizing this at the federal level and honestly even at the state level. We also sent letters to the governor of each of these states, Tennessee, Ohio, Texas, Florida, and said, this hospital gets money from your state. You should look into and operates within your state. You should be looking at whether they're violating people's civil rights.
So I haven't looked in depth at the list of the hospitals, where they're located, the states they're located in on your report, but just based on what you've rattled off, it sounds like they're actually mostly in Republican states.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the real tragedies here is even in states where you have a political party in charge that doesn't support racial discrimination in the form of DEI, that doesn't support the mutilation of children through transgender ideology, some of these hospitals are still engaging in this behavior. And so this stuff is not going to stop until we force it to stop.
But aren't they getting state and federal money?
Yes, at the very least in the form of Medicaid dollars, which is a state and federal partnership. These hospitals are all being subsidized by and receiving our tax dollars. Many of them get research grants and additional grants for patient care for those who are underprivileged from the state. So not only is it just that they operate in these states and shouldn't be engaging in this activity that's illegal, they're often directly subsidized by these states, which makes it even more egregious.
Right. And so I'm sitting here wondering, don't these legislators know what's going on in their own states?
Well, I will give the legislatures a little credit here. There's always a lot, David Hume said there's always much ruin in a nation, and I'm sure that's true at the state level too. So having some friends who are elected officials in the state house, I know that they have way more problems to deal with. So that's why organizations like Consumers Research play such a pivotal role in helping to highlight, because your average elected official doesn't have time to be, going and auditing the web pages of places like Cleveland Clinic and Vanderbilt, but we do. That's why, we're honored to be supported by thousands of consumers from across the country, and that allows us to have the staff to look through this kind of thing, and then highlight that for the elected officials, so they can take the action, but we do the research for them so that they don't they know what's going on.
Well, let me ask you this: if they're getting the money through Medicaid programs, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Then would the state legislature have the mechanism to not have that money go to that type of procedure?
Yeah, in general, every state, in almost pretty much any situation I can imagine, when they are funding an organization, whether it's through Medicaid or any other kind of program or as a contract as a vendor, if they are violating people's civil rights, that is a contract violation with the state. You cannot engage in racial-based discrimination and continue to operate as a state vendor. So if that's proven, and many of these organizations had stuff on their website bragging about engaging in DEI and those types of programs. Cleveland Clinic bragged about having a minority men's health program, a minority stroke program just for people of ethnic minorities, right? Then that is then the state has a legal, not only ability, but obligation to cut that organization off from being a vendor for the state and getting state funds. So this is a very serious issue for these organizations. That's why I think we've been calling attention to it. It needs to be corrected. Many of these organizations, these are the top names in the country: Johns Hopkins, All Children's, Henry Ford Health, Vanderbilt, Cleveland Clinic. These organizations that were set up by wonderful philanthropists who cared about their communities, wanted people to have top-notch health care, and for many years, these institutions provided it. Our hope is that they would go back to focusing on that, and that the future CEO of Cleveland Clinic, whether it's the guy they have today or the guy that they hopefully replace him with, or the woman they replace him with, would say, healthcare is entirely our mission. That's all we do. We focus on providing the best quality healthcare for as many people as we can. But we don't worry about politics. We don't worry about racial discrimination. We focus on finding the best doctors and doing the best research that we can, providing the best care. That's our hope. And that would be greatly aided if state leaders were to investigate what we're highlighting at these hospitals and push back on them and say, listen, you better fix these problems or you're not going to be getting state funds anymore.
Sure, but, I mean, they make money off of these procedures.
They do, and it's unfortunate that they have been willing to engage specifically in the mutilation of children simply to make a buck. I think it's partially motivated by profit motive. They want to make money, but also you have many true believers, people who for whatever reason are sick in the head and think it's a good thing to mutilate children surgically and with chemicals. And unfortunately, those people probably are not going to give it up, until they're arrested, I assume. Because, many states have already made it illegal, and we've seen some of the hospital systems in Texas continue these types of activities after they were made illegal. And I worry that that's what's happening at Cleveland Clinic today. The data that we have from the Do No Harm database only goes up until 2023. So we don't know if they've continued with these procedures and these injections after Ohio banned the procedure last year. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And the fact they were willing to lie in a legal they used their lawyer to threaten me, right? And they lied about the fact that they did these procedures doesn't bode well for, whether they would follow the law now. I just, until, Reagan said trust but verify, I would say don't trust and verify when it comes to Cleveland Clinic.
Gosh. Will Hild is our guest, Executive Director at Consumers First. Thank you so much for bringing this to our listening audience attention. Folks can follow you on Twitter at Will Hild. Please follow me back at The Right Melody. And I do have one last question. And then, of course, your organization at Consumers First. You can find them on Twitter at Consumers First. One last question for you, sir, and that would be, what is your favorite charity?
That's a great question. I am actually, ironically, even though I live in Bethesda, Maryland, I'm on the board of a prison ministry in Ohio called the Ridge Project. And it has nothing to do with consumer protection or anything like that. It's a completely different, unrelated issue, but they are one of the best ministries in all of the United States in terms of lowering prison recidivism, meaning the chances of people who've gone through their program reoffending when they come out is minuscule compared to the general prison population. So I highly recommend people take a look at the Ridge Project in Ohio.
Excellent. Very good, sir. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the program. As always, you are welcome back anytime.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and really appreciate the attention on this matter.